So when you first started in this position that you mentioned, and before you started using Literably, I'm curious, what challenges, if any, was Jacksonville facing when it came to the area of reading assessments, broadly defined?
I think Jacksonville has always been really good at assessing, right? There was never a lack of giving students tests, but I think there was some area for improvement in inter-rater reliability of really being able to determine, okay, if I gave this assessment and you gave this assessment, are we going to get the same scoring out of that? Is it because I know the students? Am I giving them the benefit of the doubt? Or am I truly just doing it with the fidelity of how the assessment was intended? So that inter-rater reliability, but also I think the time it takes to really use whether like a reading inventory, right? We had been using DRA, that's the one that we used personally, but do all of our teachers know how to do it? Because not everybody's a reading specialist. When you're a teacher, you're a jack of all trades, right? So after giving it, the amount of time it takes to give it, and then you have to analyze it. So was all of that really happening, or were we just giving the assessment because we needed something as a benchmark in the fall, winter, and spring? So that was kind of the challenges we were facing.
Got it. And can you remember, as you were kind of seeing those challenges, when you maybe first heard about Literably and ultimately what made you decide to implement it at Jacksonville?
I do actually. So the director of curriculum got an email, looked into it, and she's like, could you look more into this? And we set up a call, and immediately we were like, wow, this is going to save time. And I believe it was with Tyler. And he just immediately knew what teachers were struggling with and kind of had a solution. And listen, we weren't the vulnerable people thinking with rose colored glasses, this is going to solve all our problems, right? But we really looked at inter-rater reliability and the time that it was taking us to do all the assessments we needed. This was a possible solution. So we really made sure that first year to just pilot it with people who were interested, and then went from there. So it really was just from an email.
How about that?
Yeah.
Sometimes that can happen.
Yeah.
Uh, and now that you're been using Literably for a few years and maybe have moved past kind of that pilot phase, can you just describe how you're using Literably at the district level, as well as how you see or think teachers are using it in the classroom?
Yeah, so as a district, our goal over the past couple of years really has been our tier one instruction and our student outcomes. So are they matching? So we're really, when we pull the data as a district, obviously look at individual schools, but also look as our district as a whole in proficiency. Like where are our students reading and where do those gaps appear? But at the teacher level, they're really using it, obviously benchmarking 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. But the great thing that we found with Literably is that it is more of a diagnostic than a typical benchmark is. Like you get a lot more out of that, but we're able to use that next step because we've purchased the 9 rounds. We're able to, in our language, we call it strategic monitor students. We're able to check in to make sure once a month, where is everybody? Once we are using instruction, intervening, and it's a quick check for us to determine is what we're doing working. So they're using it in a formative way to kind of change their instruction, but they're also using it to identify what groups of students need additional support outside of just grade level material, but who found it foundationally needs some holes filled in to be able to access that grade level information on their own.
Great. And so thinking about how it's being used in these different ways, would you be able to describe the impact, if any, Literably's had on your district? Have you found that Literably has been able to address those challenges you described earlier around reliability or time savings?
Yeah. I think, and to be in full transparency, which I feel like we typically are, is that we understand that an assessment isn't always going to solve every one of our problems. We know that with everything, right? And if there was, everyone would be using it. But the issues we were having in general, like I said, like that inter-rater reliability and time to grade, and someone being able, and I don't know if I hit on this earlier, but like after I gave this test, what does it mean? The nice thing about Literably is that it breaks everything down so that teachers knew exactly what that student needed moving forward. Because it broke it down in comprehension and vocab and fluency, we now were able to go from overall the student is just struggling to skill specific um, domains that they could instruct on immediately. So within using Literably, we're able to have better conversations when we're collaborating, when a student is struggling. It gives us an additional piece of data from outside what we're seeing in the classroom. So we're able to analyze, are those two things matching up? Was it just this one assessment, or is it, yeah, a typical reflection? And on Literably, I think what you guys have been so responsive to is if we're having difficulties and Literally isn't giving us something we need, you guys are always really quick to listen and try to get your engineers to change some things. So you're responsive. And what's been really helpful is the shift from levels to skill specific. And I know that we can create our own, but there's also a plethora of examples in that drop down of by student by standard, which is really nice because that's where our teachers, our educators are moving.
Wonderful. And so as an add-on to that last question, I'd be curious, not sure what you have here, but have there been any over the years, any kind of memorable success stories about maybe a specific school, a teacher, student, maybe even a parent, as it relates to their journey with Literably, or, separately, have you noticed any notable improvements in student performance since adopting Literably? So feel free to grab onto anything there that might resonate.
Yeah. I think I know this sounds silly because it's not a specific example, but I think something that people love to have is that secret link. I think it used to be called, it maybe called something different now, but when you get to share an example of how students are reading in your classroom to a parent, the old way of having conferences or communicating with parents is always just storytelling. And I'm just giving you a narrative on how your students are doing. And a downfall as a parent is you don't get to be a fly in the wall. You don't get to hear your student. And what you see at home could be different than what we're seeing here in the classroom. So when we get to share that link with parents and really invite them into the classroom, it is just opened a lot of doors and a lot of conversation because they officially get to be a fly on the wall, and we can do it every time they read. And additionally, we found success with that link, as little as it is, also with everybody who works with that child. So if it happens to be a student who is EL, or a student who is special ed, or a student who is receiving title services, we have additional information that all of us can hear and collaborate at the same time. So as little as that link may seem, it's just really important to really make sure all stakeholders are involved when talking about student success, and having that shared responsibility and accountability. So building those relationships too.
Great. Well, you've sketched out like a nice picture from where you sit kind of in the district leadership level. I'd be curious, if there's anything to add here, though. Is there any kind of feedback that you receive from teachers, students, or parents, as you were just kind of mentioning, regarding Literably? Anything from those conversations that you're having with those different groups that stands out?
Uh, Being able to see it live, like when you guys put it in graphs and we get to see their time, like when they've started with Literably to where they're reading now. One parent specifically in a meeting I can picture, we were talking about her student and she just really didn't understand because we were using a lot of words, right? And when you try to relate to the parent and try to eliminate the teacher jargon and just relate to them one-on-one, when we were able to show her pictures, show her the graphs, show her the type of text that her student was reading. It clarified for her how she could be supportive at home. And then we were again able to just open up that conversation of how she could help and how we again could increase that partnership from home to school. And that was just by using Literably.
Great. So it's kind of closing up here, maybe two more questions. I
Yeah.
guess ultimately, based on conversation today and kind of your experience with Literably, is Literably something you'd recommend to other districts? And if so, why?
I definitely would. I feel like there's a lot of reasons. And I know I keep going back to this one, but rater reliability, making sure that the subjectivity is taken out is first and foremost was a perk for us. Um, Sometimes do things need to be scored totally, but right, that's with any program. Um, but it gives us a common ground to start off, and it gives us kind of back that instructional time and really allows us to just analyze, because I think before we were just giving it and not analyzing as much, but now we get to spend time really looking at instructionally, what do these students need and where should I go next in my instruction. Um, and honestly, the resources that you provide, especially when looking at research and responding to research, you can tell with Literably when something arises in education, you guys are proactive and you listen so you know what is coming. For example, the decodable books that are now on the assessments have been really helpful. And again, those assessments per skill have been really helpful. So they're, to be honest, if a district was asking, I would say yes immediately. And I really wouldn't have anything negative to say, because even if we have, an area of concern, you guys are really responsive. And it has saved us time and given us some common ground to have discussions. So it's been a really positive experience.
Great. So final question. Any other advice you might give to districts as you're thinking about what we're talking about today, or anything else you'd like to share that maybe we didn't get into before we depart?
Um, I don't think so. I just think overall, and I don't know if I just said this in sharing out, the conversations we've been able to have surrounding reading, comprehension, and success in the foundational skills wasn't happening when we were using our old diagnostic assessment. Our older assessment, we were just doing, we were used to doing it, and it didn't lend itself to conversations. But now, like I said, because all of the things are analyzed for us, we get to dive in and really compare it to the other peers, which allows for collaboration and better student outcomes. So that's just been really, that's probably my biggest takeaway with Literally.
Well, Tabitha, thank you so much for making the time to chat today. We've, of course, really appreciated the partnership over the years and just like really value your insights and feedback. So again, thanks so much.
No problem. Let me know if you need anything.